us. My name is Wendy Pender. I'm the Older Adults Program Coordinator for the King County Library System. This event is brought to you by the King County Library System in partnership with Seattle Public Library and the Northwest Center for Creative Aging. I'm going to repeat a few things just because we do have so many people yet to come in. We're going to remain muted because it is such a large group. We will take questions in the chat and get to as many of those as we can afterwards. And the contact information for all of the speakers is in the chat already. This is being recorded. If you do not wish to appear on camera, go ahead and turn your camera off. And Ruth, if you haven't started recording, would you please start recording? Thank you. Great. And we will send a link to the recording when it is prepared. It'll be at least a couple of weeks. Don't call me tomorrow and say, where's my link? It takes a little while to get it captioned and all that. I'd like to thank our captioners and CJ Glenn and Cleo Brooks from the Seattle Public Library, who are our accessibility consultants, doing a beautiful job walking us through the technology. We still have a couple of minutes, so I'm going to repeat what I said, and we're going to continue to admit people. Just want to welcome everybody. I'm Wendy Pender. I'm the Older Adults Program Coordinator for the King County Library System. I'm seeing lots of familiar names, mostly because I was the registration person. Thank you for hanging in there with that registration process. It was a little different, especially if you're used to coming in on the Seattle Public Library side. This is a working partnership between SPL and KCLS and the Northwest Center for Creative Aging. You'll be muted throughout the event. We will take questions in the chat. Please type them there and we'll get to as many of those after the speakers are through. After the conversation is over, we'll take those questions, but you will remain muted throughout the event. We're recording it, so if you do not wish to appear on camera, please turn off your camera. I'm looking down at my notes. Let's see. Both Nancy and I, Nancy Sloat is the Older Adults Program Manager at SPL. She's my counterpart across the water. Hello. We've both done book lists for this event, and those are in the chat, along with some other resources. The Alzheimer's Association, the University of Washington Memory and Brain Wellness Center, Momentia Seattle. You may already be familiar with some of these local resources. We are so blessed in this region to have so many wonderful resources for people living with memory loss and dementia. We are also, if you would be so kind as to do the survey that we have put in the chat box, Nancy will remind you of that at the end of the event. That can be launched at any time. It will be also included in the follow-up email, which you'll get, which will have all of those resources in it. It really helps us improve, and it also helps us report back to our funders that this is an important topic of conversation in our community, that this is really a wonderful event and they should continue to support things like it. So really appreciate your assistance in filling out those surveys. Love to have numbers, love to have stories. You know, if you have a personal experience with Elderwise or the library, you can pop that in the chat too. Love to hear all of those things. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your being here today. I know we're all busy and zoomed out. We'll get started in just a minute. I see Lisa's question about adding those things. You might have to scroll up in the chat, but I can certainly add those again. And this will be my last time. I'm Wendy Pender from the King County Library System, welcoming you to the Elderwise Way, a different approach to life with dementia, this beautiful book that we'll be discussing today. It's my honor to have Sandy Sabersky, Ruth Newell Falcon, Rebecca Crichton, and Nancy Sloat hosting this event with me, and I'll turn it over to Nancy for a land acknowledgement. Thank you.
Oh, hello, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm the Older Adults Program Manager for the Seattle Public Library System, and we too are very, very happy to bring you this program and to partner with the Northwest Center for Creative Aging and with the King County Library System to bring you this wonderful conversation with Sandy and Ruth. Before we begin our program, I'd like to start by showing respect for the indigenous people of our area and to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. So thank you for that moment. And now I'd like to introduce you to Rebecca Crichton. She's the Executive Director of the Northwest Center for Creative Aging. Rebecca?
Thanks so much, Nancy, and welcome everybody. We are thrilled, all of us, to have so many of you interested in this conversation and in this topic. I think I want to tell you that we are closed captioning this. So if you actually want to read what we're saying, you can go on your screen. There should be something that says closed caption. If you click on the little arrow next to it, it should let you see the closed captioning. Hopefully that will be the truth for you. So because there's such interest and I don't want to use up too much time, I just want to say a little bit of background, which is that I've been on the board of Elderwise for 10 years. So Sandy is a good friend, and this book, we started talking about this book maybe almost 10 years ago. And so it's been a long birth process. I work with Ruth Newald Falcon. She is my associate director. And I am proud to say I brought them together, and everything, as they say, the rest is history. So this book came out in September. There's been increasing interest in it. We probably never would have imagined that as many people would want to hear about this and talk about this as we do. And this event is proof that that is the case. So I am not going to waste any more time chatting about me or about us, but I'm going to go right into the discussion with Ruth and Sandy. And Sandy, you need to unmute. There we go. So this is for you, Sandy. You've had 25 years of experience of working with people with dementia. And I guess we want to know tell us something about what that's been like for you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And I want to publicly acknowledge this team that put this program together. I know it's taken a lot of coordination, and I'm very grateful for that. And I would like to say,
Sandy, you need to unmute again. There.
Where did I leave off? Did you hear the thank you?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll say what I'd like to, I'll start with the hello again, and hello to all of you in attendance. I'm really happy that you're here, and I'm operating on the premise that you have been touched in some way by someone living with dementia. And maybe it's someone close to you, or maybe someone more distant, but I'm operating on that fact that you all have some interest and experience with people with dementia. Regarding the question, I can say that never in a million years did I expect that I would be sitting around the table for 25 years with people with dementia. And even more than that, more surprising is that those years, when I think about them, have been some of the most memorable and some of the most joy-filled years of my life. You might ask, how can that be? So I'll give you a few reasons. One, something that I've come to learn is this idea of the expanded heart. People that have maybe some cognitive challenges, the brain function doesn't come to them as easily. And so what is available is the heart. And so what I've noticed is that sometimes the heart becomes expanded as a person's cognitive function declines. So what that means is that I'm sitting around a table with people with open and warm hearts. Another thing is that often people sitting around the table there's a vulnerability to them. As many of us know with our own aging, sometimes aging alone brings a certain kind of vulnerability. And also any kind of disability that may come along with that brings a certain kind of vulnerability. And even so with dementia, there is that feeling. And that vulnerability also allows us to open a little bit more. I find that people are willing to try new things and share in new ways. Maybe they sit up a little taller and maybe they lean into the conversation. When we first started Elderwise, I had this hypothesis that people with memory loss, people with dementia could learn and grow. I wasn't positive about this, but I had this idea they could become more open, they could become more joyful, and they could become more willing. So this is important because we are all getting closer to death. Every day that we live, we get closer to death. And I don't know what that death experience will be like, but I'm imagining that it will be better to face that experience if we are more open. So all in all, I think, working with this population has been an honor and a wonderful personal growth experience for me.
Sandy, thanks so much. That's wonderful. I love the open heart idea. So I'm curious, how does the book help us think differently about dementia?
Okay. So the philosophy of Elderwise, which is fully explained in the book, is what helps us to think differently about dementia. We call this philosophy, it's our spirit-centered care approach. I want to make a point to say that it's not about religion, but rather it's about what is the deepest and most important part of us. And this deepest part may be different for different individuals. We may call it differently. We may see it differently from different individuals.
So a little bit more about spirit.
Yeah. Well, the foundation of the spirit-centered care is this idea of wholeness. And so if you can imagine with me a continuum from birth to death. So on the one side of the continuum is maybe the youngest person you know in your life, maybe a baby. For me, it's baby Ayla. And to the oldest person you know, somebody maybe in their 90s. And think about all the people you know in between that chronologically fit across that continuum. And they may have various abilities and disabilities. And then you can ask yourself about each person that you know, are they whole? Are you whole? And so at this point, I'd like to ask Ruth if she would read a part from the book that goes into this in more detail.
Right, I'd be happy to. A baby doesn't have full brain cell connectivity. Full level or salvation. A teenager doesn't have a fully developed frontal cortex, yet we have a societal understanding that individuals in these age groups are whole, even though not fully developed, either mentally or physically. We also have a general societal understanding that if someone has had an amputation of a body part, the personhood, the who are you of that individual, their essence remains intact. But when it state affects the brain, such as in Parkinson's or the question hits closer to home, and we may not be as clear in our answers. Even more so with dementia. As brain function, the ability to think and remember progressively declines. How then do we answer the question, is this person whole?
So regarding the question of wholeness, I know that some of that reading was a little bit broken up, but I think the idea is that, if you're a baby, we don't ever consider that a baby isn't whole. They're able to, they're not able to have a conversation and do certain things, but we consider them as whole. And so with each stage of life and with every ability and disability, as we see into a person, we see that they're whole. If it's an amputation or a broken leg, we don't consider that that person is not whole. And at Elderwise, we just take it a little bit further. We take it a little bit deeper, that even if your brain isn't working correctly, we are not just our brains. We are more than our brains. And so we consider that the depth of who we are is whole. The core, the depth, the essence of who we are is always whole. So if you believe this, like I do, then it informs every aspect of how we are with someone with dementia. As a caregiver, a care partner, or friend, our challenge is to practice seeing this essence, this depth in each person, and not being distracted by outer things like the condition of our bodies or of our clothing.
So Sandy, I'm curious, what are you hearing about how this book is helping family and friends of people who are living with dementia? What have you been hearing?
Okay, I have a lot to say about that, Rebecca. Thanks so much. However, I wanted to say a little bit more about spirit-centered care, if I could.
Please do, of course.
Okay, so this idea of wholeness, this concept of who we are in our essence, is part of the foundation of spirit-centered care. And Ruth has another reading that can help us hone in on these concepts of spirit-centered care.
Well, I hope so. Let me know if I'm inaudible, because in which case I will stop reading.
Okay.
The foundation of
Okay,
spirit-centered care is a profound recognition.
Okay, you are breaking up, Ruth.
Good.
You're breaking
Okay,
up.
so let's forget me.
What page is that? 68?
68, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll read that piece.
Great.
The foundation of spirit-centered care is a profound recognition that each person's essence is immutable, regardless of the physical or cognitive changes that they may go through in their lifetime. There are 5 practices that are necessary for fostering and carrying out the Elderwise philosophy of spirit-centered care. Recognizing and working from one's own essence, a recognition of the essence of others, a deep respect for our equality, no matter our present condition, an understanding that roles can instantly change. We call this the us versus them phenomenon, and active development of deep listening. Fostering these 5 attitudes enriches our own spiritual lives and enlivens our work with those in our care, especially the frail elder. So to say just a little more about each of those pieces, working from our own essence. My daughter took Aikido at one point. It's a martial art. And in that martial art, you learn to move from your center. So you center yourself and then you move in the world, you move on the mat from your center. And that's what working from your own essence is. You stay connected to your center and even taking it off the mat and out into the world. The second piece is recognizing the essence of others. So you see in others that same deep essence. That piece of equality, you know, if you believe that one person's essence is the same as another person's essence, then that is a kind of a sense of equality. It doesn't matter one's position, it doesn't matter one's race, it doesn't matter one's ability or disability. There's a sense of equality. And according to that philosophy, we don't ask people to do anything. I wouldn't ask somebody to do something that I don't find meaningful myself. I wouldn't want anyone to do something that wasn't of value. That's why at Elderwise, we eat together, we paint together, we talk together, and so forth. And then the us versus them phenomenon, that idea is that, you know, don't get too comfortable in your position, because your position may change. A doctor may be in need of the care by the very patient. Maybe the doctor will need CPR, or we know that things can change in an instant. And the last piece is deep listening. So what we want to do is listen with our whole selves. And that's not just our eyes, but also our ears. As Ruth says, it's kind of a presence. We're listening with our whole presence. So I think that's about it for spirit-centered care in a nutshell.
And so just to return to, how are you hearing about how this book is helping family and friends of people with dementia?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Rebecca. I'll try to give some key points about how this can be helpful for family and friends. I would like people to feel confident that it is enough to just be with people. There doesn't always need to be something to do. And for this, I'd like to give an example. This is not a personal story, but it's one that I heard that I think is worth repeating. There was a young chaplain, and on his first assignment, he was to see a woman in the hospital who had just received a difficult diagnosis. She was crying, and he sat by her bedside, unable to think of anything to say. She continued to cry, and he continued to sit there, trying to think of what he could do, what he could say. Later, later she fell asleep, and he left feeling very disappointed in himself that he didn't do a good job. Sometime later, they ran into each other, and she went up to him and said, "Chaplain, you helped me a lot. You gave me exactly what I needed." And so I think this is just a good lesson for sometimes you don't have to do much.
So that's also a good example of, go ahead, keep going.
I have more examples, but you can say something.
No, please give us more examples.
Okay. So another example is sharing a moment, sharing a moment with someone. And here, I'd like to think about a moment as you could look at a little moment like in a magnifying glass, and a little moment magnifies, it becomes bigger. And I'm thinking of this, and there was an Elderwise participant, and I would sometimes see her walking in the park with her sister. And it was a neighborhood park, and I would go to them. And Teresa, she would wave her arm, and she was also holding a cane. So she was waving her arm with her cane. So it was very long, extended. She was using the cane like a pointer even. And she was saying, you know, like, look, there's a friend. Look, there's the trees. Look, there's the park. And there was this joy that one could just catch. And she was delighted to see me. She was delighted with the environment. And that moment became important. It was an important memory for me. And I think it was an important memory for her. There's a poem by William Blake, and it has one line in it that says, "To see the world in a grain of sand." And I think that's talking about a moment. And I think it's important to think about, especially in a progression of disease. As a person becomes more progressed in their disease, the world that is meaningful becomes smaller. So maybe it goes from 8 people to 3 people to 2 people. The world becomes smaller, and that is enough, but it's no less important. So I'm thinking about, my mother would see sometimes a raindrop on a leaf, you know, and then maybe the sun would be in the raindrop on the leaf. And so you'd see a little rainbow in a raindrop. And, you know, you don't need the whole ocean. A raindrop is enough. Sometimes the smell of a rose, small things can become meaningful. And then I'd like to just also say one last thing about slowing down time. We have this, those of you who know about Elderwise, we have what we call an Elderwise time zone. And it's where we slow down time. And I think that's another reason why I like working with people with dementia, is because I like working in slow down time. I don't think that fast, and I am more relaxed, and I feel more comfortable when time is slowed down. We have time to pour the coffee. We have time to have a conversation. And slowing down time is an invitation to open up. It's even one of our taglines, creating space to age well. So this, you slow down time enough, it's this invitation to open up. Now, I know that the caregivers out there don't have a lot of time, and you have to do and get a lot of things done. But if you can notice now and then a moment where you can slow down time, that's another idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. So I think you've captured a lot of this. I can tell you, as a person who knows Elderwise well, every time I would walk into the Elderwise room, there was this sense of spacious time and open heart. It's just, it was palpable, and everybody mentioned it who would visit us. I'm curious about some of the challenges facing families who are dealing with people who have memory loss. What are some of those challenges?
Okay. I do have a whole other little section I wanted to share about deep listening.
Okay.
Could I do that first?
Yeah, you could, sure.
Okay. Well, I mentioned a little bit about deep listening, but I wanted to say a little bit more. I wanted to share actually a personal story that I had with my father. And when he was dying, he would stop breathing for periods of time. And during that time when he would stop breathing, it would be like he would just sort of collapse and fall asleep. And so if I was sitting next to him, he'd just sort of fall into my arms. And one of those times, you know, he fell into my arms, and then he woke up and realized where he was. And there was this sense with his whole presence, he said to me, Sandy, and I felt perhaps more than ever at that moment that I was seen by my father. It's one of my memories of him. And a fellow member at Elderwise used to say regarding communication, what's in you has to come out, or it wants to come out. And so, you know, people don't, it's not always what comes out, isn't always just in words. We have a current participant who more or less responds to yes and no questions. But if you ask him to express in movement how he's feeling about something, or if he wants to say something through movement, then a whole other thing bursts forward. So for him, the way of listening is to listen for his movement. And I've seen other people who, for example, you can listen to them through dance. If you turn on the music, somebody who can barely move is suddenly across the room to the other side, and I don't even know how they got there. So this is just to say that listening can have to do with all of who we are. And I wanted to say, for example, if you want to start a conversation with somebody with memory loss, a good way to start a conversation is to make an observation about something. For example, maybe you walk in the door and you can say, something smells good in here. You know, let's go see what it is. Or these are beautiful flowers. Let's take one and study the petals. Or I might say, I see you're dressed all in blue. And that gives somebody an opportunity to just say, yes, everything matches. Or yes, let's go see what smells good, rather than asking a factual question. For example, you know, how many children do you have? Or what is the name? What is your wife's name? Or what did you have for breakfast? These are questions that may or may not be able to be answered by a person with dementia, but it makes an uncomfortable situation for all parties. And what we need to do is understand that if I can't remember my wife's name, that doesn't mean I love her any less. And it is not the facts, but rather shared experiences that create this connection and shared feelings.
Lovely, lovely. So just a little bit about challenges for families dealing with some of the memory loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see, a family member can see that their loved one has lost a certain amount of competence. They can't do what maybe you relied on them to do before. And naturally, this is a big loss and a big change. It may feel even that they aren't the same person as they were before. I know that caregiving can be tiring and frustrating and exhausting. Sometimes it's easier for someone who doesn't know, who didn't know the person before, to appreciate who they are at the moment.
Mm.
Seeing someone's wholeness and essence, it can help us remember that there is so much more to a person than their declining abilities. And it makes it easier to remember your love for them. We can remind ourselves to see them as their essence. So this doesn't happen overnight. It takes a kind of practice. You have to make a kind of a habit out of seeing the wholeness of someone, out of seeing their essence. And in fact, this attitude can enrich all of our relationships.
Thank you, Sandy. As I'm listening to you, I'm aware that practicing some of these things will have a change on our own way of being in the world in general, and not just with people with dementia. Which leads me to the question of, in addition to people who are dealing with dementia, who else do you think can get value from reading this book?
Well, if you think about the spectrum that we talked about from birth to death and all the people we know, all our friendships and work relationships, we are all born into this world and we live our lives with different gifts and different abilities, different assets, different challenges. None of us are perfect. I look around at my friend group and I say, well, here we are. We're all a little different. We all have little quirks. Sometimes we annoy one another, but I do my best to enjoy them. I do my best to see their essence, their warmth, and their joy. So like you were saying, Rebecca, my hope is that the book will help people be kinder and more tolerant to one another in general.
Thank you. So we haven't been able to meet for a whole year, and I'm wondering how Elderwise is adapting to the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, after we realized that the pandemic wasn't going away anytime soon, we created 2 online Zoom programs, a conversation group called MiniWise and an art program called ArtWise. And these programs are designed for people with dementia. And both of them are open to new participants. So if you're interested, you can find out through the email info@elderwise.org or our website, elderwise.org. And I definitely miss being able to meet in person. And I sure hope that we can get back to doing that pretty soon as the CDC says that we can. But I am gratified and surprised by how well our programs are translating to the internet. So much so that even when we are able to meet again with our online programs, we may continue our online programs because these can be especially helpful for people who have difficulty getting places and traveling, and even it can include people out of state. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand you're working on some educational materials that are based on the book. Can you share some of that with us?
Yes, and I'd like to point out that Ruth here is the producer of our educational materials. We're excited about our video teaching series for caregivers that accessibly share much of the philosophy and approaches that are in the book. And we've just completed our first pilot for the first 8 modules, and we hope that will be available in September. And just to put in a plug, Elderwise Facebook, if you want to follow us on Facebook at Elderwise, or on Instagram at Elderwise Seattle.
Wonderful. So there's so much more we can talk about, but I want to make sure we have time to take questions. And as you may remember from back when we started, we're going to be able to take questions from the chat. So if you have questions, Ruth, you're monitoring the chat, I think. There may be questions there already that we can begin to answer. But if you have questions for Sandy and for Ruth, put them in the chat. And Ruth, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask the questions. Or ask the question and figure out how to answer.
Ask. I will ask. So can you hear me okay now?
Yeah,
Is
seems
the
better.
first question. Okay, I unplugged my microphone, retro is better sometimes. All right, so the first question that came in, and I don't know if we should repeat them, say the names of the person who submitted, or just, because I think the content is what matters. How do you deal with someone who is so far gone that they don't remember that they have memory loss? She gets so bewildered when we try to explain her situation to her.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think there's no one right way to do this. My mother-in-law has dementia, and sometimes, I would go along. She would think she was going back to Ohio, and sometimes I would say, okay, you're going back to Ohio. And then sometimes I would say, you're here in Seattle. It's a little bit intuitive. Can you say the question again and make sure I...
Sure. How do you deal with someone who's so far gone they don't remember that they have memory loss? She
Right,
gets so bewildered when we try to explain her situation to her.
right. And so I think, you have to meet a person where they are. And, that some of these things that I mentioned, being with someone, to just be together, to enjoy a moment, maybe you take a walk and you enjoy something together, and the bewilderment will happen. And you can use your own judgment about what's more important. Is she asking for the truth, or is she just needing you to go along with where things are at the time? I really don't like to lie. And at the same time, I don't want to cause shock to somebody who has a different belief system. So you try to meet somebody where they are.
Well, it makes me think of what you said before about factual and not asking facts. So perhaps that falls into that same category. It's not, unless they specifically want to know, it's perhaps not necessary to have that conversation and just be in the present with that person and not try to. I mean, I think I used to do some of that with my father, and it was a long time ago. And I think, I don't think it's a service to encourage people necessarily using it, which I think is a different way of saying what you've been saying.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. I agree that the feeling, that's the experience, it's the connection that's more important than what is actually real, because what is real anyway?
Right.
There, we won't go too far down there.
Well,
But
here's
it's
another one sort of related. My mother is in the earlier.
Oh, Ruth, I'm so
Dementia.
sorry.
She has no awareness.
It's
Ruth, you're
Huh?
okay. Try again.
Okay. My mother is in the earlier stages of dementia. Am I there?
yes.
Okay. She has not awareness of it and doesn't think anything is wrong with her and that we are all delusional. Any advice on how to handle this?
Yeah, I mean, what matters is not that she knows that she has dementia, but I think safety comes into play here. Like if she wants to drive or do things that aren't safe, and that is very tricky. I don't have any particular expertise on that. I don't know what else to say. Anybody else?
Well, let's go to the next question. And if somebody does have
Yeah, I think. Well, there's a thread happening here, a theme, because someone else said, you are attempting to answer my question and my friend has all this stuff happening to her, like her car was taken away. She has round the clock care. She wants to know why.
And you just froze up.
Does someone else have access to these questions that
Yeah.
could?
Yeah, let me look and see. Okay. She wants to know why meeting her where she is isn't an answer, is what you said. I'm wondering, let me see if there's anything else here to, word for word, let's see. I'm just trying to, let me see if I can find some of this. So I'm going to go to another one and let's see if we can come back to it. I've used these theories in working with people who've experienced other things, homelessness, domestic violence. The commonality is seeing people who are marginalized and seen by society as less than whole. That speaks, I think, to the whole person things that you were saying. And as I listen to all of this in approaching even other illnesses that involve the brain, it could be used for other things, addiction, homelessness. These principles apply to more than just dementia. And thank you for that. Let me see. I do want to find. Here's from somebody. As to the question about everyone but her is delusional, what about meeting with a doctor and having an honest conversation? This worked well with my husband and helped us. It was delightful and I enjoyed the experience as much as they did. So I guess in some ways that's a question about how do you get outside support for some of this to work with some of these people. So any thoughts, Sandy?
I was just reading the chat.
Yeah.
Saw something come up from Stephen. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Well, it's so and actually, I'm going to go to what Stephen just wrote, which is actually something that, as all of you who are beginning to get familiar with knows, there's lots and lots of information out there. And I'm thinking about Teepa Snow, who often will demonstrate changing the subject. And what Stephen says is, you can try changing the subject like singing a song, looking at a flower, reciting a short poem. And I think one of the things that I know that you do, Sandy, at Elderwise is that you move the topic out to something that can be seen and experienced together. I mean, your example of bringing that up for somebody is helpful. And I think the attempt to orient people in the here and now tends not to necessarily work as much as we hope it will. Any thoughts, Sandy?
Yeah, I think the doctor idea is a good one. I think especially with older people, they have a certain respect for doctors, that they will listen to doctors where they don't listen to others. And, there are challenges that I don't have the answer to. I know it's difficult. And, if somebody wants to drive or the car keys are taken away and, people don't feel understood, they see that you see what, anyway, they don't feel understood. So I hear that.
Yeah. So other questions, we still have time, and I guess, Sandy, you could keep, as people are putting questions into chat, you could share more about what else have you learned in the process of seeing people's response to this book? What are you hearing from people?
Well, I mean, I got a sweet note the other day from someone who said that they were, underlying things and learning things like they felt like they were in college. And I sent it to a friend of mine whose brother has dementia. And, they were not particularly close. She wasn't that close with her brother. And, he's an alcoholic and so forth. And yet she felt obligated to support him somehow. So what she felt, she said that the book helped her to realize that it could benefit her as well as, it could be a spiritual practice for her to work with him and, work from her own essence. And that she didn't have to be his best friend, but she could enjoy the moments with him.
Yeah. There's a request of answering the question about conversing with a dementia parent, and how to, it sounds like this is a desire to, like, how do you talk to a parent who is really struggling? And this may be the delusional parent we're talking about, I'm not sure, but yeah, dealing with somebody who really is not able to accept whatever it is that's happening, but doesn't understand what's happening. I may have not captured that properly, but
to talk with a dementia, if your parent has dementia, how to talk to them.
yeah, I think that's the question.
Well, I think I am thinking of a daughter who came to came to Elderwise and was with her father, and they had a very, very sweet heart connection. So it's the love that has to connect, and not letting some of the other things get in the way.
Yeah. So I think there's another question that relates to this, is about, and I can imagine this is a challenge, tips for speaking on the phone with people with dementia. Yeah.
So I'm going to share some things about this from our conversation groups that I think could relate, which we have conversation, we have discussion groups or topics. And when you ask a question to this person, and each time you kind of reorient, I'll say, well, so-and-so, we've been talking about, this was our recent one, we've been talking about the sense of smell, and how it affects our lives. And so I reorient to the question by saying it in a different way. And Mom, we've been talking about flowers, and I'm noticing that these flowers are growing here. Can something grow up, what's growing where you are? But to just kind of reorient the conversation often.
Yeah. Thank you. And this probably relates to this next question, which is, can you give some more examples of how to slow down time? The friend we care for often comments that we talk too fast. So we need some tips on this. And I mean, for all of us, slowing down time.
Yeah, well, I think, I often think of this idea of being in New York, where things go fast. And, people with memory loss, things go too fast because they can't process. It takes time to process. If you want something to come out, if you want that flower to bloom, it has to have a space. And so slowing down time, it's like, if you can let the wind can stop blowing, if you can make an environment that's more relaxing and calming somehow. And it doesn't mean you can't take a walk or get your energy out or do various other things, but it is to just talk a little slower, say fewer words, don't talk so much. Keep a little bit quiet. So those are some, I don't really know what else to say. Each activity, if you're, pouring the tea or serving, it matters how you do it. If you spend a little time being more intentional with how you do something, there's more than one way to serve tea. There's more than one way to, make a sandwich or cut vegetables. If you do it with a focus and an intention, it just slows down a little bit.
Here's another one, and it's a clarification of a question that we haven't gotten right yet. But what do we do when somebody can't get the right word? Do you prompt them, or do you wait for them, or do you, what do you do about that? And just disappeared in front of my, okay. Yeah.
Right.
Do I prompt or patiently wait for them to get the right word?
again, it's different with different people. And, I might, use a different word, or might say, oh, I see that we're thinking about this. And, some people don't mind if you give a word and other people do. So again, it's just, what am I trying to say? It's individual. You have to use your
Yeah.
intuition a little bit.
And here's a question that I think may be true for many people, and it's certainly an uncomfortable one, which is, what advice do you have for people whose parents are mean, nasty, angry, and paranoid?
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody, it's not everybody who has an open, loving heart. And so protect yourself, I would say. And, make some kind of bubble around yourself. If you are involved, if you are caregiving, do the best you can and stay in a kind of a protective bubble. Get some care for yourself, get some self-care, and try to get more people on your team if you can.
Yeah. Shirley has written that they have a wonderful caregiver for her husband in her home. And when she's reading your book, she reads it out loud and slowly. We found he's really interested in it. I think he actually understands and feels included in working with his dementia. So that's nice. What else?
That is nice.
How would you address the facilities that are understaffed and say that they don't have time for all that, and all that being some of what we're talking about here, I think?
Right. And, our programs, our educational programs are meant to be for people working in facilities, at least primarily. And so, I think to some extent, caregivers can learn a little bit more how to, be present even in a rush. And yeah, I mean, that's been a huge challenge right now when people can't go in to communities and you can't support what's going on there. So that is a loss. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, that's all I can say is that, if you can go in and be an extra support, that's good. And if people can do a little bit more, if caregivers can learn a little bit more how to make the most of each moment, that's good too.
There are a couple of threads in the chat about the value of having a neurologist or other doctors speak with people, certainly around giving up driving and other things.
Mhm.
And again, what have you found, Sandy, around including other professionals in working with working?
I'm all for it.
Good. Let's see. Here's something. The Alzheimer's Association has good training sessions with very concrete suggestions on how to approach these communication questions and behavior issues. This presentation from Elderwise has been helpful to change my way of thinking to implement the more concrete suggestions. Thank you. Thank you, Christy, for that. We're coming toward the end, and I know that Nancy wants to finish and ask you to ask for a number of things. So Nancy, I'm going to ask you to unmute and you can close us out here.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I know there are some questions that haven't been answered. We have provided contact information for a number of different organizations way up in the chat. But we will be sending out a follow-up email that has all of these resources listed, as well as the contact information. We also will be sending out a recording of this program. As Wendy mentioned, it will take a couple of weeks to get the captioning in there, but we will send that out as well. And I'm just going to put into the chat our survey. It's a SurveyMonkey survey. We'll stay on and keep this meeting open for a little bit. after 2 o'clock so that you can get to that survey right now, or we will send that link out in our follow-up email. So we definitely appreciate all of you coming, and I hope you've gotten some valuable information and other places that you can go for support. So let me get the SurveyMonkey survey link in here.
Thank you, Nancy.
And yeah.
And again, thank you everybody for coming. This is exciting that there's such interest in this. And again, there's more information on dementia and cognitive loss than there has been before. And the more we learn about it, this is not going to leave our world. And all of us, as we get older, are going to be dealing with varieties of our friends, family, and maybe our own dealing with how our brains are working or not, to the extent that that we're paying attention. So thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Ruth. We're going to stay on. For the next 10 minutes or so if there's other questions. But if you want to leave, feel free to leave. And as Nancy said, and as Wendy said, we're going to be sending out information on the questions and on the resources, and you'll be able to listen to this again. And thank you for coming. So so I'm officially closing, but we're still here if there's some more questions. So I'm going to go on the chat and look and see what people are saying. Let me see.
While you're looking at that, Rebecca, I'll just tell folks we were unaware that our attendance was capped at 100. So you may have friends and associates who were not able to attend today. I have been frantically replying to their emails saying, I am so sorry, the event is being recorded. We will make sure that everyone who registered gets the recording. So thank you very much, Ruth, for recording it. So I apologize for that. And it's a live and learn world with technology now. We did not realize that license had that limit. So.
I didn't either. I thought it was a bigger license. So I apologize as well. And what can I say? It seemed like a nice round number. That was a surprise. So I do apologize. We thought we had a license that let us have more. But it will be available and people can see it, and maybe we'll do it again at some point. Now we know how to do it. We could do it again potentially. There's a thought nobody wants to enter into right away, but you never know. You never know. So, anything else? Good. All right. So should we just say goodbye? What do we think? Looks like we may be.
Oh, I like that, Sandy. That's a new Zoom goodbye. A little heart.
I was inspired by Shirley.
What a great idea.
Little heart.
Right there.
Okay. Well, I'm going to keep it open just for another few minutes, and then we can get off. So.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye. I've got another meeting and I've been back-to-back Zooming all day. So thank you, everyone. I look forward to communicating with you again next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So Ruth and Sandy, do you want to stay on a little bit? Other people are leaving.
Sure.
I feel like I'm gagged, so it's kind of weird.
I know. I don't know what happened. You know what? I'm going to close this and invite you to an instant meeting. How about that?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm going to close this out. Thank you, Stephen. Each day is different. So I'm just going to read what Stephen says. Thank you. I know it's a long road and it goes on and on. Each day is different and comes with new blessings and challenges. Thank you for your compassionate approach. And thank you, Joy, for the captioning. That was terrific to be able to have closed caption. We learned how to do that one, so that's good. And so I'm going to close out this meeting, and I'm going to invite Nancy, Ruth, and Sandy to an instant meeting. It'll just take a minute or so. Okay.
I have a question first.
Yeah, okay.
Did
Sure.
this meeting not happen then?
This meeting did happen. What happened was that we had 100-person limit, which we thought we had 1,000-person limit, but it turns out that the license that we
I-
had was not for more than 100, and that is my error, and I so apologize.
So what, it was supposed to be a 2 o'clock meeting? Is it now?
No, it was supposed to be a 1 o'clock meeting. We're just ending. But
Okay.
to repeat something we've said is the recording is going to be available. And you'll be able to hear able to hear the presentation, and you'll be able to see the resources that were available. So hopefully people will do that. And Wendy has everybody who registered will be getting a note in a couple of weeks about the program, and they'll be able to read it. They'll be able to watch it again. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
so sorry. So I'm gonna say goodbye and my bye.